Hello, everyone. Welcome to Second Cup with Keith. I'm your host, Keith Giles. We are live now on YouTube and Facebook and what else? Instagram. Yes, if you're following my Instagram page, I'm live on my Instagram page. Usually I will say this Quaircast podcast is brought to you by the Quantum Sayings of Jesus. And I just did. But I want to also give a shout out to my friend D.T. Bryant, and he has a fantastic book that's been out now for a couple of weeks. It's really great, and I'm afraid it's going to get lost in the shuffle. It's called "Unless a Seed Falls to the Ground," and it's a wonderful book. He talks about this concept of a hospice spirituality, a hospice Christianity. In other words, that the Christian church as we know it, the evangelical Christian church as we know it, that it needs to die. And we need to be leading it through this hospice phase so that it can die. Because again, unless a seed falls to the ground and dies, as Jesus said, it can't come, it can't bear fruit. It can't come back to life. We can't be resurrected. And we desperately need a resurrected church that's more in the image of Christ today. So that's going to be, this episode is brought to you by Unless a Seed Falls to the Ground by D.T. Bryant. Go and check that out on Amazon. Really great book. Hey, everybody, welcome. If you're watching me live on any of those platforms I just mentioned, you'll notice I'm a little dressed up. I don't normally wear like a suit jacket and a dress collared shirt. Usually I'm wearing a t-shirt. And that's because I just this morning came back from the El Paso County Commissioner's Court, where I gave the opening invocation. It was about 2 minutes long. And this is, Wendy and I have just become members of Americans United for the Separation of Church and State, looking to join an organization that's kind of pushing back against all the nonsense that's going on right now. All this talk about an anti-Christian bias in America, which is laughable and ridiculous. And executive orders that are being written and followed that are anti-Christ and even against the Constitution. So we joined that organization this weekend and went to one of their chapter meetings. They mentioned that they were looking for people to lead non-religious invocations at El Paso County Commissioner's Court, and I volunteered. And it was great. It was actually a good experience. I would do it again. We'll see. I talked a little bit about my 2-minute invocation, as you might guess, referenced the fact that according to quantum physics, the quantum field is everything and everything is the quantum field. And therefore that means there is no separation between us, that we are all connected. And what happens to one of us happens to all of us in the name of justice, calling for equal justice with empathy and compassion. And I hope it was received. Anyway, so welcome to Second Cup with Keith. I was literally just kind of debating before I went live here, like, what should I talk about? So many things I could talk about. I'm going to touch on a couple of things. I will say the main topic I want to talk about today is the Gospel of Philip. But before I do that, just a couple of other things I want to touch on. The Super Bowl. If you watched the Super Bowl last night, I'm not a huge football fan, but I did watch it with some friends. We were invited to a friend's Super Bowl party. It was great. Had a lot of great food, great pizza, chicken wings, really great garlic dip, wine, sodas. It was great. Watched the game, watched the Chiefs get destroyed by the Eagles. I don't really care either way. So congratulations if you like the Eagles. Condolences if you like the Chiefs. But whatever. Honestly, the thing I was looking forward to the most was usually it's the commercials, right? I don't know about you, but I thought the commercials this year were awful. They were just embarrassingly bad and dumb. I do want to talk about one of those commercials in a minute. But first, I want to just say a tiny bit about the Kendrick Lamar performance. So I'm not a Kendrick Lamar fan. You may know that Matthew DiStefano, who's the co-owner of Quar Publishing, is a huge fan. And in yesterday's live show, Heretic Happy Hour, or Heresy After Hours Live, that's what we talked about on the show. You can catch the replay on the podcast. We were kind of making predictions about the game, but also really kind of about Kendrick Lamar and his performance, which was fantastic, by the way. Even though I'm not a fan or a huge fan, I like him, but I don't own any albums, and I don't regularly listen to hip hop. But I do appreciate what he does. I have liked some previous. I did listen to his record, How to Pimp a Butterfly, I think it's what it's called, and I really enjoyed that. Great lyrics in that one. Anyway, I thought his Super Bowl performance, even though it was not intended to be entertainment necessarily for someone like me, an old white guy, it was actually powerful. And I'll be honest, there were layers to what I was witnessing that I noticed at the time, but I didn't understand completely. And I had to, and people educated me after the fact, and I'm really grateful for friends of mine who afterwards told me, like, oh, hey, did you notice that at the beginning there were black people dressed in red, white, and blue, and these black bodies formed the American flag, and this is symbolic of how America was built on the bodies of black people, the bodies of black human beings who were slaves. And then did you notice that the flag separated, and then Kendrick stood in the center of that flag, and there was a noticeable gap between the left side and the right side of that flag, and that was symbolic of America now being divided. We were living in this divided time frame. Of course, everybody's talking about the opening line. The revolution will be televised. You picked the right time, but the wrong guy. Yes, that was a reference to Donald Trump. And if you notice, his set ended with a song, "Turn the TV Off." So the revolution will be televised is the first line, and the last line is "Turn the TV off," meaning it's over. Basically, he won, right? Mic drop. Everything that happened in between was also very symbolic. Again, I encourage you to go back and look at it through that lens, because I think you'll get a lot more out of it. And maybe even look online for people that are pointing out maybe some of your black friends or people of color or people that listen to Kendrick who noticed things you didn't notice. It was all layers and layers of what's going on, and I really love that. And I think it was the perfect time to give a subversive message and kind of a little bit of a middle finger to the president who was in attendance in a time when executive orders are trying to eliminate DEI, diversity and equity and inclusion, from the government as well as from big business. When the NFL itself decided to remove from the end zone the phrase "end racism." I thought it was really interesting that John Baptiste, a black man, did the Star Spangled Banner. That Kendrick Lamar, a black man, did the Super Bowl halftime show. Samuel Jackson dressed up as Uncle Sam. Again, there was a lot going on there, a lot of hidden meanings, hidden to white people mostly, probably not hidden at all to people of color. But it was very well done. Kudos. I posted Kendrick Lamar, congratulations for winning the Super Bowl, because that to me was one of the highlights in an otherwise one-sided game. That there wasn't a lot else to enjoy for me anyway. But you may have also noticed, if you watched the game, there was, as always, there's a commercial, these "He Gets Us" commercials. Last year they ran a commercial. This year they ran a commercial. And again, it's not the commercial itself. The commercial itself was, this is the irony. The organization He Gets Us, takes all this money and spends millions of dollars to film and produce a 2-minute, 3-minute ad. Then they spend $6-8 million, $10 million to run that ad on a Super Bowl. And the message that's in the actual ad is very Jesus-y, right? It's very much about, this is who Jesus was. And, that's the whole "He gets us," meaning Jesus gets us. But you need to understand that organization really is funded by people who really don't believe that. They don't abide by the teachings of Jesus, the Sermon on the Mount, this, loving your neighbor, loving and caring for people, whether they are, no matter what religion they are, no matter what color their skin is. That's not what they really are, the people funding them are standing for. And I did an article last year, a series of articles actually, about how the He Gets Us organization funnels people's personal information who respond to these ads, not just the Super Bowl ad, but ads that are run on Instagram and on other social media channels with similar messaging, encouraging people, hey, if you need someone to listen to you, if you're going through a hard time emotionally, right, you're vulnerable, and you're all alone, and Jesus cares and we care too. And so give us your contact information and answer this little survey, and we'll connect you with someone locally who can pray for you and help you. So again, all that sounds great, doesn't it? But what I discovered was there was a woman here in El Paso. I will not share her real name, but I found out through a friend of mine that this person, who was not a Christian, who taught like a local yoga class or something like that, some kind of spiritual class, responded to the ad, was at a low point in her life, saw the ad on Instagram, the He Gets Us ad, responded to it, gave her information, answered the survey, was contacted by a local pastor. The local pastor took this information, which they purchased from an organization called Glue. And this organization is a Christian organization that's basically a data mining company, and sold this woman's information to them. And then that information was abused. It was recorded in a sermon, which was recorded and posted on their website. Anyone could listen to that sermon, and I did. I went to that El Paso church's website. I listened to their sermon, and I heard this woman's personal, private information being not only said out loud, shared without a permission to a room full of Christians, and completely identifying her, everything except her name, to the point where I was able to listen to that message that was then later posted on their website. And I found this person within 2 minutes with a simple Google search. I knew what they looked like. I knew their real name. I knew where they were going to be on the weekends, at what time. I had their business address and information. And I was able to contact that person and let them know that their personal information had been compromised. Anyway, it all worked out in the long run. But I wrote a series of articles exposing this. And what I found was, again, I went down the rabbit hole and I found out that He Gets Us and other organizations like K-Love is another one, another big Christian organization that will ask people on the radio, if you would like prayer, call our number, go to our website, give us your information. We'll connect you with someone locally to help you, blah, blah, blah. So again, it all sounds great. But when you go to the website, and I did, you can sign up with a credit card. And all they ask you is, do you give us your credit card information? And when you give them your credit card information, they don't ask you to verify that you're a pastor. They don't verify that you are part of a Christian organization or any organization at all. You could literally just be a creep with a credit card who wants access to people's personal information in your zip code, who are vulnerable emotionally and are going through difficult times. And then you're going to get their number and you're going to tell them, oh, I'm responding to that ad that you saw, that He Gets Us ad that you saw. And, let's meet for coffee. Let's, you know what I mean? Like it's so dangerous and it's being abused. And in this example, this person's information was abused. And this is one person, right? I'm sure there are many other people who have experienced this kind of abuse of their information. So He Gets Us is not a safe organization. They're not a good organization. You should not respond to those ads. You should not give them your information. And you should know if at any point you have given them your information, it can and probably will be used against you. They say that this information is not being used, even say this on their website. They say that the information they collect is not being used to get people to go to church. But on the back end, if you go to the data mining organization Glue, that's actually selling this information to anybody with a credit card, they're selling their services to people with credit cards by saying, hey, sign up for our program and we will give you names and information of people in your town so you can grow your church. So, they're saying one thing on this side of their mouth and something else on the other side of the mouth. Of course, this whole thing is to get people, to recruit people to, proselytize and get them to join your church. Why else would they spend the money for the ad? And why would they spend the money? Why would churches and ministers spend the money to get this information? Because there's a couple $100, right? Every church that signs up for this. So anyway, I was disappointed to see yet again another ad, which is so insidious, I would say, because on the outside, it seems like there's nothing to object about. I would agree. The ad itself is not objectionable to me in any way. What I object to is why they're running the ad and what they're doing with the ad and with the people that respond to the ad, what they're doing with how they're abusing these people's information. And so I'm reminding you of that, that's not a good thing. Anyway, all of that. So that was a little 16-minute ramble. I just had to get that off my chest. Anyway, the Gospel of Philip. Let's talk about the Gospel of Philip. Let's see. Before I do that, I got a couple of comments. Judy Springsteen says, good morning. Yes, good morning, Judy. So at least a couple of people are watching this morning. Yeah, so the reason why I want to talk about the Gospel of Philip, I have said many times, right? I have a book on the Gospel of Thomas, The Quantum Sayings of Jesus, from Decoding the Lost Gospel of Thomas. That book is my best-selling book of all time. I have published like 12 books and nothing has performed, sold as well as this book. And I'm very excited about that. I'm very honored by that. I'm very proud of that book. And again, I believe that the message in that book, this quantum message that Jesus gives us in the sayings that are recorded in the 115 sayings that are recorded in the Gospel of Thomas, if you really know how to listen and understand and decode what he's saying, is a message that we desperately need today because we are a divided nation. We're divided politically, religiously, racially. We're divided by gender, orientation. We're divided really any possible way you could divide the human being and the human psyche and the human race. We are divided. And the message in the Gospel of Thomas is this beautiful message that idea, that concept of being separated from one another is an illusion. This idea that we have drilled into us by religion, that we are separated from God, is an illusion. It's a lie. It is not true. Jesus emphatically repeats over and over again in the Gospel of Thomas that we are all connected to God and nothing will ever separate us from God. And Paul says the same thing in his letters, in Romans, for example, and in Colossians and in Ephesians and other places. Jesus says it in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John also. So it's not even just from the Gospel of Thomas. It's just that Thomas is a collection of it's just the sayings of Jesus. And the point of really most of those sayings is to remind us that we are not separated from one another and we're not separated from God. And so the reality of the universe, the reality of the kingdom of God that's within us is that we are connected, that we are one with God. We're one with each other. And I feel like we need that message now more than ever, more than ever. So again, I'm very excited about that book doing so well. Still number one after like 10 months, over 10 months. Like it's coming up on a year. Like if you can make it 2 more months, it will be a year at number one on Amazon. Just thank you, everybody who's bought the book, shared the book. I know some people that are doing book clubs with their church groups and just book reading groups, book clubs, reading the book with some friends and talking about it and discussing it. Many of you are using the book as a devotional, and that's I think that's probably the best way to not just to read it, but to kind of maybe every day read one of the sayings and read the reflection that I give, because I'm basically giving a commentary for each of those sayings. So anyway, of course, because that book is doing so well, and because that book came out of a weekly series that I started a little over maybe a year and a half ago now, called The Inner Circle. So this is a subscription only. So yes, it's behind a paywall. I started this thing called Inner Circle, and every Friday I post, what I did was I would post one of the sayings from the Gospel of Thomas and my commentary. And so if you subscribed to that, either through Patheos the blogging platform, or through my personal Patreon page, which is a better deal. It's $1 cheaper. It's $4 a month instead of $5 a month. And you get access to my weekly newsletter and all the other kind of stuff that I post on there. So you get behind the scenes stuff. Anyway, so that's how that book, The Quantum Sayings of Jesus about the Gospel of Thomas, kind of got its start. Was, every week I was publishing for 114 weeks. I published those sayings of Thomas. So I finished that around the time I finished the book, published the book. But I want to continue that weekly inner circle. Every Friday I'm posting a commentary on something. So after we finished the Gospel of Thomas, we went through the Gospel of Truth, and we finished that. And then we decided, well, let's do the Gospel of Mary. And actually, I think this week we finished it. I got to decide if I'm going to do one final Gospel of Mary post this week, or if I'm going to start the Gospel of Philip this week. I think I'm going to start the Gospel of Philip this week. I think I'm going to have time to do that. And so I'll be publishing a book collecting this most recent batch of Inner Circles posts, with a lot more additional material that I didn't include in those weekly posts. That book is in progress right now. As we speak, we are going through the second draft of that book, or creating the second draft of that book. That will be called The Quantum Gospel of Mary and The Lost Gospel of Truth. So it'll be a commentary on both of those books because they're relatively short. So then thinking, well, if I want to keep going with this inner circle thing, the Gospel of Philip makes the most sense. And here's why. Because again, what I'm excited about in the Gospel of Thomas is this idea of oneness and connection, right? The illusion of separation between us and God. Now, that theme continues in the Gospel of Truth. This is a Valentinian text, not a Gnostic text. Thomas isn't Gnostic. The Gospel of Truth is not Gnostic. These are Valentinian texts. I'll explain that in just a second. And so is the Gospel of Mary. In other words, all three of these texts were highly favored by a Christian sect, sort of not the proto-Orthodox sect, but a group of Christians who are led by someone named Valentinus. And so they're kind of referred to as Valentinian Christians. If you go back in a time machine and talk to any of them, they would have just told you they were Christians. They wouldn't have said we're Valentinian Christians. They just would have said we follow Jesus. That's what all of them would have said. So anyway, so this concept is repeated of oneness and connection. It's repeated in Mary, and it's repeated in the Gospel of Truth, and it's also repeated in the Gospel of Philip. Now, the Gospel of Philip, very similar to the Gospel of the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip was also discovered at Nag Hammadi. In fact, it was found in the same little bundle alongside the Gospel of Thomas. So they were bundled together with a couple other books. And I don't know if that's significant or not, but it does seem that they were, if there was an intentionality about how they were bound together, it seems like someone was saying, okay, these kind of go together. And the Gospel of Philip, now similar to Thomas, it's discovered in Nag Hammadi. It's also Valentinian. It also contains a few sayings of Jesus that are not found in the canonical Gospels. So, as I said, the Gospel of Thomas has 114 sayings, and half of those do already appear in the Gospels that we have in the New Testament. The other half are brand new. In the Gospel of Philip, it's not quite that many. I think there's something like 15 total sayings of Jesus. But again, this is not just a collection of sayings. So but it does contain sayings of Jesus in addition to the sort of stories that are shared. But there's a total of 15 sayings of Jesus. 7 of these sayings are found in the canonical Gospels that we already have in the Bible. And 2 of these sayings are very closely related to sayings that we see in the Gospel of Thomas, which is interesting because it's combining sayings from Thomas and Matthew and Mark and Luke and John. So that's an interesting thing that's happening in Philip. It's combining these things together. And then, of course, there's a couple of sayings that scholars believe are unique, right? They don't appear anywhere else other than in the Gospel of Philip, and I have only started to look into it. So I'm very new to the Gospel of Philip. This is I will be going through it alongside all of you as I'm writing these weekly posts. You'll be learning what I'm learning as I'm going through it, as I'm reading it, as I'm doing some background research on it, and that kind of thing. It seems that most scholars would date the Gospel of Philip around the 3rd century. So that's fairly late. And so that, if that is true, it's not so that's what makes it unlike the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Mary, because many scholars will date Mary and Thomas to around the time of the writing of the Gospel of Mark or Matthew or Luke, right? Then previous to the Gospel of John. Philip is a lot later. But that may not discredit it because, again, it's quoting the sayings of Jesus from those other Gospels, and only a couple of the things are new. And so it is a Valentinian text. And again, and you're going to see a lot of different scholars who will disagree because this is what scholars do. That's largely what they do when they publish something, is to disagree with one another and try to, make their point. But the Gospel of Philip, it's a Valentinian text. Like the scholars that argue for the Valentinian understanding of it are kind of the scholars that I prefer. People like Dr. Elaine Pagels, people like this. So I lean a little bit more towards, what she says about things. I think she's pretty right on. But yeah, we only have one copy of the Gospel of Philip, and it is that single copy that was discovered at Nag Hammadi. And that was buried around the 4th century. So it was about 100 years old when it was buried. So it's a little bit closer to what we would think of as a gospel, whereas Thomas is not. Thomas is just a collection of sayings. Philip, the Gospel of Philip, it has parables, it has narrative dialogue, it has a bit of a biblical exegesis of Genesis. So it talks a little bit about the creation story. And of course, it has these sayings of Jesus that can come across in some ways maybe dogmatic in certain ways. One of the editors and translators of the text, his name is Wesley Eisenberg. He is attributed, as I mentioned, 17 sayings to Jesus, 9 of which he says are citations and interpretations of the ones that are found in the other Gospels. And he says the new sayings are identified by the formula as he said, or the Lord said, or the Savior said. Again, very similar to the Gospel of Thomas, where it's, and the Lord said, or Jesus said, or whatever. So again, just sayings that are dropped in there. Although he takes a Gnostic approach, and I do not. I think it fits much more what I have looked at, what I have read, because I haven't read the entire thing yet, but I've read excerpts and quotations from the Gospel of Philip, and so yeah, it does come across to me as much more Valentinian. But yeah, so it also talks a lot about, this is important. It talks a lot about Mary Magdalene. So Mary Magdalene is a character in the Gospel of Philip and agrees with the Gospel of Thomas regarding the tension between Peter and Mary Magdalene, which we saw when we went through the Gospel of Mary. And so we're going to see another version of that confrontation recorded in the Gospel of Philip. It also deals a lot with baptism. And so it uses, you could say these are sacraments, right? The Orthodox Church has made these sacraments. Valentinian Christians, I guess you could say they're sacraments. I see them more as metaphors. So they use the metaphors of baptism and marriage and that kind of thing as metaphors for spiritual awakening and spiritual maturity And of course, in the marriage situation, in the marriage metaphor, it's a metaphor for our connection with the divine, right? Which again, that's very similar to what we see in the Bible, this sort of the bridegroom and the bride, the lamb, and all that stuff, right? This marriage feast of the lamb, this metaphor of marriage is used to describe how the two become one, right? In the same way that Adam and Eve were originally one. Eve was taken out of Adam, but then they reunite again in marriage and in sexual intercourse. They become one flesh, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, right? And then that separateness is restored into unity and oneness, right? So it's this beautiful picture of the two becoming one, which is a big metaphor, a very big refrain throughout the Gospel of Thomas. This idea of when you make the two one, so that the upper is not like the lower, and the lower is not like the upper. When you make the male into the female, and the female into the male, so that the male is no longer male and the female is no longer female, but they are all one, right? That's from the Gospel of Thomas. Jesus says, then you'll enter the kingdom, meaning then you'll have understood, you'll finally get it. It'll click for you that this concept of separation isn't real. What's real is our oneness and our connection, our unity with God and with one another. So, the Gospel of Philip, I think it's going to be fun. I am looking forward to getting into it. There's some really great sayings from it. I'm tempted to share a couple of them that are really great. And I can't find there's one that I really love, and I couldn't really find it. I did a little search here trying to kind of identify the one I was looking at. And I take that back. Actually, I did find it, but then I think I lost it. Anyway, it was something like, love never says, this is mine, but instead love always says, everything is yours. And I'm paraphrasing it, but that's like one of the sayings that I heard the first time someone told me about the Gospel of Philip, and they shared that quote with me, and I was like, ooh, I like that. That's really good. And it has all those kinds of sayings. There's some similar sayings, like, for example, there's one saying from the Gospel of Philip that's almost a verbatim quote from the Gospel of Thomas. It says, the Lord said, blessed is he who is before he came into being, for he who is, has been, and shall be. Again, that's just an awakening to the awareness that you are one with the divine consciousness, which is eternal. So in other words, you recognize that you are identified with the one that you were connected to before you came into being, right? Before this body, this expression of the Christ, of the oneness, of the divine consciousness, was given form and shape. And so blessed are you if you recognize that you are the one who came to be before you came into being, right? When he says, for he who is, has been, and shall be, right? That echoes this idea of the divine idea of like the God who was and is to come. So now you're identifying yourself with that. You also are the one who is and who was and who shall be forever. It's a complete circle without beginning or end. Okay. There's another one. Let's see. From the Gospel of Philip. He who has knowledge of the truth is a free man, but the free man does not sin, for he who sins is the slave of sin. Truth is the mother, knowledge the father. And again, that's a similar idea we see in the Gospel of Mary and in the Gospel of Thomas, that sin is an illusion. Sin is something we create. It's not something that actually exists in reality, because reality is the mind of God. And in the mind of God, all sin has been forever forgiven, forgotten, cast as far as the east is from the west, and remembered no more. And love, because God is love, keeps no record of wrongs. And as Paul says in 2 Corinthians, God was in Christ, not counting our sins against us, but reconciling the entire world to God's self. And so that and many other reasons, for that and many other reasons, this concept of sin is one that we need to get beyond. We need to get over it. We need to move past that. I've talked about that several times. Let's see. And it's going to be weird because I'm just going to be reading these to you without really diving into it. This is what I usually do when I'm writing these. I'm reading them. And this is what I did with the Gospel of Thomas. What I tried to do was when I sat down to write each of the, the articles every Friday in the Inner Circle, which is, what eventually became the chapters for the book. What I would do is I would sit down, I would read a chapter or I'd read a saying, and without any commentary or notes, having not looked at anything ahead of time. That's what I want to do. I want to read it just sort of as a blank slate as much as possible. And I want to try to read what the text is saying through this lens of oneness and connection, through this lens that that separation is an illusion, and that we're all one and connected, right? And so I will read it once, and then I'll try to read it again through this filter, and then I'll try to understand, okay, what is actually being said here, because quite often and I've learned now, having gone through the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Truth and the Gospel of Mary, I'm kind of primed now as I go to the Gospel of Philip to look for certain phrases. Okay, for example, there's certain anytime there's a phrase about rising up or standing up or waking up, this is a reference to this spiritual awakening, right? So that you got to pay attention to that. Anytime there's a reference to the earth or the world or something like that, that is talking about the illusion, because the world is what perpetuates the illusion. The world that we're born into sort of puts the wool over our eyes and projects outward to us, sort of like this matrix that seems real. Everything seems like this is reality. And until you sort of take that red pill and wake up in your pod, to use the Matrix film analogy, you don't realize the reality. You don't understand what's really true. It's like awakening from a dream, which would be closer to what the analogy they would use, of course, right, in the 2nd century, 3rd century. Not having a concept of science fiction, of course, they would say dreams, like you're in an illusion, you're in a dream. And you think this is real because when you're in a dream, it feels very real. And Jesus basically says, wake up. That's a dream. That's not reality. Don't fall asleep. Stand up. Because when you stand up, you'll wake up. And when you stand up, wake up, you open your eyes, you look around and you realize, oh my gosh, what I thought was real isn't real. I'm really not separated from God. I'm really not separated from anyone else. I am part of this divine consciousness. I am an expression of this divine consciousness in the world. And yes, part of that expression has flesh and blood, but that doesn't separate me from anyone else. And it doesn't separate me from the divine. The fact that I have a physical body, right? Because again, that's an outward projection, and the true reality is beneath that. Beneath that is this realization, right? That the quantum field is everything, and everything is the quantum field. So I'm looking for those kinds of things when I go through the Gospel of Philip. I'm looking, and I will be looking, as I said, when I sit down to actually this week and go through the Gospel of Philip and start writing these weekly posts for the Inner Circle, I'll be looking for those kinds of statements, right? Yeah, so I'm deciding now if I want to look at any other sayings. Here's a good one. The Lord did everything in a mystery: a baptism and a chrism and a Eucharist and a redemption and a bridal chamber. And again, that bridal chamber refers symbolically to this relationship of oneness and connection between God and humanity, right? So in the same way, the marriage relationship implies the devotion of a husband and a wife to each other, or one spouse to another. This symbolic meaning is found In other places, right, Matthew 25 uses that metaphor as well. But it's not intended, this is where we can take the metaphor too far. It's not intended to say that you are connected as the bride to the groom, to Christ, and others are not. So it's not an exclusionary oneness and connection. It's just simply a metaphor to help you remember what it's like, but not what it's not like. Does that make sense? So you have to be careful with metaphors, right? Yeah, so I'm looking forward to the Gospel of Philip. I think that'll be a lot of fun. It's not too long. And I'm not sure how long it'll take me to get through it. Let me see if I can find it. Because online you can find the complete text of it. Here we go. So I'm looking at it here. It's relatively, okay. It's not short. Okay, yeah. It's longer than the Gospel of Mary, but not as long as the Gospel of Truth. So it will probably take a couple of months to get through it. But I'm looking forward to that. Man, lots of lacuna in here, sort of like missing pieces. Anyway, so like I said, my process is I will try to come to it as a blank slate. I'll read the passage. I'll write down what I'm getting out of it. And after that, then I will go and look at commentaries, because there are some commentaries where scholars have some thoughts, and usually there's different perspectives, right? This was especially true of the Gospel of Mary, I noticed, and the Gospel of Thomas. So anyway, then and only then I will look at this. And when I've done that, what I found really interesting is sometimes the things that I saw in it and I pulled out of it and I've already written about it, then I go and read these other scholars and they'll verify what I'm saying. They'll say, like, they'll validate it, right? Like, oh yeah, that thing you saw, okay, yeah, okay. Other people saw the same thing and pointed it out, and then, okay, great. So that always makes me feel good. But you know what makes me feel even better is when I go and look at the commentaries after I've read through it and nobody saw what I saw. That happened a couple of times in the Gospel of Thomas, and I was so excited about that. That like, oh wow, like I literally saw something no one else saw, or at least if they did, I'm not coming across it, right? I'm not seeing it referenced. So that's always good. That's kind of fun, and that's the kind of thing I'm looking for. I'm hoping to be able to come up with some fresh perspective on these things. So if I finish going through the Gospel of Philip, and again, that'll probably take a couple of months. I'm thinking possibly, and again, I have not looked at the text to see if there's anything really worth our time. But I'm thinking about possibly looking at the Gospel of Judas. If I feel like there's enough there. If not, then I may not bother with the Gospel of Judas. I know that it's controversial. I know that people might be interested in it just because it's got Judas' name on it. But I don't know personally that I'm personally really interested in it. I mean, some scholars think the Gospel of Judas might be a little younger than Philip, that it could be 2nd century. So maybe. But it just feels like fan fiction. You know what I mean? It just feels like I don't know how seriously I should take the contents of the Gospel of Judas, beyond sort of like a, hey, some early Christians thought this way or believed this way. So, okay, that could be interesting. I don't know, and part of my skepticism also is not just sort of the origins of it and the authorship of it. I'm also a little concerned about whether or not like, does it have this same kind of message about our oneness with God and with one another. And if it doesn't, if it's sort of like missing that message, then I probably won't. I probably won't include it. Because even though it could be interesting, and even though some people might find it fascinating and scandalous and all of that, once you get beyond the shock value of it, I just don't know that there's anything spiritually there that's sort of like worth a takeaway, like worth our time and energy to look into it. If it's just kind of like, if there's not really a message in it that's something that's good, you know what I mean? A good takeaway for us is what I mean. So that's my concern. I will have to look into that, as I said, and I really have not. So I don't really know. It seems like it has a lot more to do with specifically Judas and his role in the crucifixion, whether he really betrayed Jesus or whether there was some understanding that Jesus and Judas had about the betrayal and about the crucifixion and all that kind of thing. And I'll just be very blunt. I'm not interested. I'm not interested in that really at all. You might be. And if you are, maybe you should look into it. But I don't know that I'm going to or not. We'll see. And then a lot of that will have something to do with, I guess, whether or not this is material that I think will be worth putting into a third book in this sort of quantum gospel series, right? So I've got the Quantum Sayings of Jesus from Thomas. In May, I'll be publishing the Quantum Gospel of Mary and the Gospel of Truth. And so this third, if there is a third, again, would contain the Gospel of Philip commentary and maybe Judas, but maybe not. The other text that I love, that I have read, and that I do really love, and it's very obscure. It's also a Nag Hammadi text. It's called The Thunder Perfect Mind. It's a really clunky title, and most people have never heard of Thunder Perfect Mind. And I don't know that if I published a book called The Quantum Sayings of Thunder Perfect Mind, if anybody would care or even know what the heck I was talking about. Even if the content was like super cool, I just don't see that book selling. And I don't know if enough people would care. You know, let's say somebody reads the Gospel of the Quantum Sayings of Jesus book about Thomas, and they love it. And then I come out with the Gospel of Mary book and the Quantum Gospel of Mary. And then, of course, I think people would also read that because lots of people interested in Mary Magdalene. Would they read a third book called the Quantum Gospel of Philip? Do they know who Philip is? Do they care about the Gospel of Philip? Do they, you know what I mean? Is anyone sitting around wondering like, hey, I'm really intrigued about the Gospel of Philip? Probably not, right? So I don't know. There may not be a third book. I may just do this as part of the Inner Circle weekly devotionals and then call it quits and not publish the book. Not publish it as a book. We'll see. Right? We'll see. I guess a big part of that will depend on the reaction that I get. You know what I mean? Like, do I get a lot of people commenting on the Gospel of Philip? Are they really intrigued by it? Do they want to know more about it? Then I might say, well, okay, it might be worth it to publish a trilogy of the Quantum Gospels, and then we'll see. But maybe not. December Rose, thank you for commenting, December, for watching. December says, one thing I know about you is that you can literally write about anything. I envy you for that. I don't know about that. But she says, I can't even figure out how to write about the stuff I'm passionate about. Oh, but December is a great communicator and a great writer. Her book, The Church Can Go to Hell. If you have not read that book, my friends, you need to get that book and you need to read that book. I don't care what your theology, I don't care what your background. It's just a damn good book and it's very well written. It hooks you in the very first chapter. My mom read that first chapter and couldn't put it down, read it in a day, like just loved that book, and was so excited to meet December in person in Nashville right after she read it, and they connected. It was great. So yeah, shout out to December Rose and her amazing book. Yeah, thank you, December. Really good book. So anyway, that's kind of what I'm going to be diving into coming up is the Gospel of Philip. And that'll be this week. If you're not subscribed, again, I recommend you go to patreon.com to my, / Keith Giles. And you can sign up there for $4 a month. $4 a month. Super cheap. I know for many people that might even be too much. So if you can't afford that, then just wait till the book comes out. But if you want to do these weekly Inner Circle things with me and then read my newsletter and all that kind of stuff, you can sign up to Patreon and get that. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that this week. That's going to be a lot of fun. What else? So Reading Romans Right is the book that I co-wrote with Matthew DiStefano. That book is written and done. We have a cover. We have a forward. We've got endorsement quotes. We have a book launch team ready to go. We have like 30 people in the launch team. If you would like to join the launch team, please let me know. And we have plenty of room to add anybody who wants to join the launch team. The book comes out next month. Oh my gosh, March 18th. I got to get going. In fact, today, I guess I'm going to send out the advanced copies of the book to the launch team and have them start reading to get ready for the launch. And we're hoping this book is going to make some waves. It's something that Matt and I both feel very passionately about. It was wonderful to co-write with Matt on this book, to really correct all of the many ways that conservative evangelical Christians twist and distort Paul's message in the book of Romans, to have him saying things he is not saying. Romans is not an anti-gay book. Romans is not a pro-gun, pro-military, support the government book. Romans is not a book about the doctrine of hell and separation. It's none of those things. It's not a book separating men and women. It's not a book downgrading women or gay people or any of that. So Matt and I wanted to correct that and sort of reframe Romans in the right way, in the way that really it's closer to what Paul intended when he wrote that book. So very excited about that book next month. And then, as I said, the Quantum Gospel of Mary, finishing that up right now to get that ready to publish in May. So it'll be here before you know it. All right. Well, anyway, thank you all for watching and listening. Thank you all for your wonderful comments. Love you guys. We'll see you. I guess I will see you. When will I see you next? Tomorrow, we have a Heretic Happy Hour episode coming out that's really great. Do not miss this one. This is Dr. Marlene Winnell, who's the legend. She's the woman, she's a psychologist that coined the term religious trauma syndrome. She's joined by Dr. Mark Karras, who's also an author, an choir author. And I think Brandon Robertson was on that call as well. So that's a great episode tomorrow. Then, of course, we'll see you on Friday on the bonus show. Oh, I forgot. This week, Wednesday night, I will be live on the God Squad. I'm covering for December Rose. She is going to be on vacation, so I'll be covering for her Wednesday night on John Fugelsang's show, and Thursday night with Dylan on the God Squad Live, and then Friday on the bonus show, and then Sunday on Heresy After Hours Live. Whew, it's going to be a busy week, guys. I hope you have a great day. Hang in there. I know, who knows what's in store, right? Every week feels like another year. It feels like we've already been through the first term or the first year of Donald Trump's term. Nope, it's only like on week 3. Hang in there, please. Take care of yourself. Be good to yourself. Take breaks. Turn off the internet. Turn off the TV, to quote Kendrick Lamar. Take a walk. Take a shower. Take a nap. Take a break. Drink some coffee. Call a friend. Do what you have to rejuvenate and restore yourself. And again, remind yourself, no matter what all these messages are telling you, everywhere you turn, that we are separate, we are divided, that we are not divided, that we are connected. That's right. Thank you, December. Yeah, catch Keith Giles on the God Squad live, godsquadpod.com. All right. Love you guys. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next time on Second Cup with Keith. And until then, hang in there. Keep resisting. and keep resisting with love. All right. Love you guys. Take care.